Going over part 2 of my EVE review series of Rubicon to today. This is part 3, 2015. So 2015 brought a few things to us, including inclusivity, specialization, and expansion. The high-level highlights from 2015 begin with a new game launcher, French, German, and Russian localization, a new opportunity system, and burner missions. The French, German, and Russian localization is a really big deal because keep in mind that in 2015, EVE Online was 12 years old, and these are the 3 largest non-English speaking organizations in the game, or groups of players. So you had a significant portion of the EVE Online player base did not have EVE Online being served to them in their native language for the first dozen years of this game. So I think that this change was one of those matters of EVE and its developers getting around to something and it being, just about damn time. It was also a year where we saw a clarification and a huge Tiericide clarification of the function of different modules and a simplification of it and a synthesizing it down into something that was a lot more intuitive. It used to be that as you proceeded down the meta levels, from level 0 all the way to level 14, that all you had was a linear progression of power. If something was, level 7, meta 7, it would be stronger than meta 4. And while that is still tangentially kind of the case, what they were able to do with the Tiericide was to break out the different named and meta modules into different specializations. So using the example of turrets, as you go up the different meta levels, what you actually have is the ability to break out your fits into modules that then advantage range or tracking or fitting room or cap use at the lower levels, and in the higher levels really break down more into tracking versus range. So the benefits provided to those turrets by the base hulls have a bigger role in the amount of damage being dealt. And of course we saw some big art upgrades and improvements to the art. We also saw the addition of multi-factor authentication, and this is a really big part of making your EVE accounts safer and really working to, reduce the number of stolen accounts, hacked accounts, people, hacking accounts and liquidating wallets and assets, largely in support of real money trading or RMT. How multi-factor authentication works is that it works on something you have, something you are, and something you know. Something you have might be a number or a randomly generated token, which is predominantly how EVE Online's system works. You have an application that you pair with your account. It generates a random code, and when you go to sign in with something you know, your password, you are then prompted to provide to something you have, in this case, an authentication number that is randomly generated and changes every 30 to 60 seconds. The other systems that are available out there will work on something you are, typically something biometric, facial ID, thumbprint, skin temperature, retinal scan, any other biometric system. You'll find these more expensive and more detailed systems in use in things like the lock on your iPhone or in the retinal scanners at airports if you have a enhanced security clearance, and if you're moving through enhanced screening. Another thing we see added to the game is new overview and bracket icons. They simplified the patterns down into patterns we still recognize today. Anything with a triangular profile is a ship. Anything with a square profile is a structure, and anything with a circular profile is a celestial. This really does make things a lot simpler when you're looking at your overview to help you understand what it is that you're looking at. It also came with a whole new reference chart identifying all of the different types of things, and we also see the POS section of this later replaced by upwell structures, and a third category of these introduced, which is that icons which are red are NPCs. If you want to learn more about brackets, you can go to the link listed below. Then we get into the 3-dimensional space map. So improved spatial cartography. Now here it is shown in a flat view. This is just one of the better screenshots I could find. Obviously taken from a much larger or higher resolution display, but still a good example. And you have the same filtering options with this map that you had with previous ones that are just better at representing a large amount of data. And we also see special delegations, so improvements of the Corp management system. Now, this being 2015 was the last time the Corp system received a major overhaul. It is now 2020. I think it's due to be reviewed again and revised soon, but I'm not sure how much hard coding goes into this game system. But at the time, in 2015, this was a huge improvement over what had previously been 6 or 7 screens simply to control role and hangar access had been simplified down into just a couple of panels. And this was a huge improvement for people who remember back in the day, trying to manage all the disparate pieces of information. I mean, you practically needed a master's course in hangar management. This really simplified things in a significant way. It was really, really big change that helped a lot of people get into Corp management a lot sooner, make it a lot easier, especially for new bros. Now, grid size was something that hugely changed as well. We see a hugely increased local grid size. It used to be that the grid size around any celestial object was 250 kilometers in radius, or 500 kilometers in diameter, or 15,625,000 cubic kilometers, or 1.56 to 10 to the 7th power. The new grid size is an 8,000 kilometer radius, or 16,000 kilometer diameter, or 512 billion cubic kilometers. That is an absolutely disgustingly large amount of space. And you can test this on any station undock by taking a very high-speed cap-stable frigate, undock it, point your ship directly off the undock, because you will come out 2 to 5 degrees off of center. So, undock, stop your ship, aim straight ahead, double-click in space, set max speed, turn on your prop, and just go, and leave it that way. Walk away, get a coffee, come back in half an hour. And when you find yourself past 16,000 kilometers off of the undock, drop a bookmark. And you will find that as you go back to the station and as you warp away from it, this is particularly uniquely prevalent and easy to notice in Jita and Amar, is that as you warp away from the structure's grid, at 16,000 kilometers, other ships and other structures other than celestials and celestial objects like stations, those large collidables, everything other than that will fall off your overview. And it used to be that you only had to go 250 kilometers for that to happen. So this is a really big change. This is a 32 times increase in volume. Now, when it comes to specialization, we see new T2 mining ships come in the form of expedition frigates. I've covered these in another video, but I'll go over them very quickly again here. First, there's the Prospect, which gets a 100% bonus to mining gas and cloud harvesting. We get a 100% reduction to cloaking devices CPU requirement. It can fit a covert ops cloak and a covert cyno. To this day, it is one of the best covert cyno platforms to get out there for blopsing, for removing stuff discreetly. It is a convenient little ship. It also has a very short cloak reactivation delay, so I'm surprised I don't see more combat fits for this ship. The Endurance has a 300% bonus to ore mining yield, but it only has 1 turret slot, so you can only fit 1 mining laser. So in essence, it is getting balanced out against the Prospect, but it has a specialized role. It gets a 50% reduction in ice harvesting duration. It mines ice like a beast. It gets a 50% reduction in cloaking devices CPU requirement. While it cannot warp cloaked, it can move around on grid cloaked and at full speed. And that is to say that the reactivation delay and target delay have been reduced, and there's no penalty to ship max velocity when using cloaking devices. As such, if its base speed is 450 meters per second, and you have boosted that up through the addition of certain modules, not including prop mods, you can cloak up and you can bomb around on grid at anywhere between 450 and 600 meters a second. It's a pretty fast little ship when it's cloaked. The only disadvantage being that you have to drop your cloak to go to warp. Now, they also get additional bonuses. The Prospect has a 5% bonus per level of the mining frigate skill, and you need 5 levels of this to train into the Prospect. It gets basically a 25% bonus to ore mining yield and a 25% bonus to gas cloud harvesting. Then for each level of expedition frigates you have trained, you get an additional 5% bonus to mining yield. So this thing starts off with a 100% bonus, and fully trained up gives you a 150% bonus to ore mining yield. It also gets a 5% reduction to ship signature radius, which hugely advantages it when it has a micro warp drive fit. Now the Endurance gets that same 5% per level from the mining frigate skill, but it gets a 5% reduction in ice harvesting duration, which means on top of the benefits that it gets for its base roll and hull, it gets an extra 25% reduction in the time required to harvest a single block of ice. For its expedition frigate skills, it gets an additional 5% reduction in duration, which is huge, and basically a 50% bonus overall on top of its base hull roll bonuses. And it is tanky. It gets a 4% bonus per level, so 20% in total, to all shield resistances. So this is a ship you will fit with a shield tank, and that you will predominantly use for mining ice. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room in 2015, the release of Aegis Sov, or the Foundation for Deep Wars. Aegis Sov introduced a system whereby you have 3 different types of sovereignty structures that you would drop in nullsec space, nullsec sovereign space. You would have an iHub, or infrastructure hub. You would have a territory control unit, a TCU, which is essentially just planting a flag in the sand and saying this is our space. And you had stations or outposts that would be put up. And those outposts would be where you would, set your clone base and your other services, and they were service modules that had to be turned on and or off. And this required a system basically stolen from drifter technology called entosis. And entosis is what you would use to activate or deactivate or capture or destroy these devices in a giant game of basically capture the hill. And this changed in a significant way how wars are carried out in sovereign space. And I can tell you from experience and much conversation with other players, most people hate it to this day. There's a lot of disdain around Aegis Sov. I personally like it as a system. I think that it deserves a lot of balance and love in order to make it a more engaging style of gameplay. But it's not a bad way to balance, how do you keep systems of space or engagement active. Now, let's talk about the gist of how it works. So you have ADMs, or active defense multipliers. And in order to capture a system, requires you to entosis that system's structures or devices for 5 minutes for each level of the ADM. And entosis works by being available in 2 different levels, entosis level 1 and entosis modules levels, tech 2 modules, and they have different warm-up times and different consumption of stront. They use strontium clathrates as a fuel. And you have TCUs, which you can capture, iHubs, which you can capture. And it used to be that they had stations. That's no longer the case. The outposts have been replaced by Upwell Consortium structures. And this is sort of the big problem with Sov right now, is that if you have control via deployment of sufficient citadels and other space infrastructure, whether or not you control the space through TCUs or iHubs is largely irrelevant. It might be your name, might be somebody else's name stamped on the space that you're in, but if you have enough structures there to control the space de facto and to stage from there, it is your space. It doesn't matter whose name's painted on the wall. And, of course, the activities of pilots doing industry and or ratting will raise those ADMs. Spending sufficient time in a system will raise those ADMs. There's a strategic value for how long you've spent there. There's the military index for how much ratting and other destruction you've done in the space. And then there's the industrial index, which is largely based around mining. And how it works is you'll start intosising a structure like a TCU. That 5 minutes per ADM level will go by. So if you're the defender, you've lived in the space a long time, and you're very active, and your ADMs are 4 or above, it's going to take your enemies 20 minutes to capture the nodes to take control of the TCU or blow it up. If nobody comes to attack it, and nobody is trying to take it, or the defenders maintain entosis on it and keep it at a positive level, then, chicken dinner, one side wins. The territory is defended. If, for example, they manage to take it down and the structure is lost, well, then that objective, 1 of 3, has been completed, and the space is then contested. If you want to know a little bit more about sovereignty, I've provided some other links here. You can dig into it a little bit further, but it is a fairly simple system, and while a lot of people hate it, it is at least predictable, even if it isn't fair, and sometimes predictable can be better than fair. Now, security, we have to talk about the assassination of Empress Jamyl Sarum. The Amar have, for a very long time, pretty much since the founding of Eve, way back in 2002, 2003, the Amar have been and were always seen as the most powerful empire. They have the most ships. They have the most powerful technologies. They were the first ones to build Titans after the Jovians. They're their first playable race that had these advanced technologies. And I mean, like Steve, the first Titan, Amarrian, Avatar. The Amar in headcanon and in game canon, also the most powerful empire. So it was a real shock to them when their Empress, in a player event, was basically alphaed and then some times 20 by a fleet of drifters who warped in, targeted her ship, the EF Seraph, and then hit them with their drifter Doomsdays, and then proceeded to do the same to her pod when she ejected, essentially instantaneously ending the reign of Amarrian Empress Jamyl Sarum. This was a devastating event in the lore, obviously, and led into a new set of succession trials, where she was succeeded eventually by Empress Khatiz I. The Drifters also really kind of stamped their names on Eve by doing this. I mean, like, warping in with 100 battleships is kind of a statement, especially when you're more or less invulnerable, and then warping off, like the Roadrunner with a giant meep meep. It was pretty impressive. It also made them out to be a big baddie. And this event was very shortly followed by the Drifter incursions, which I really wish they'd done more with, but they're still fascinating. I'd love to write more stories about them in the lore. I'd love to see more from CCP on them, and I'd really love to know how they fit in with the Triglavians. I'd like to see more writing around that. We did see some great things that come out of these years, though. So it wasn't all doom and gloom with Aegis Sov and Drifters. We see the rise of command destroyers. And command destroyers are the Pontifex, the Stork, the Magus, and the Bifrost. These are sometimes called jump desis or command desis, but they are, each vessel receives a 4% level bonus to racial ship resistances, whether it be armor or shield. They receive a 10% level bonus to racial weapon damage, and they receive roll and ship bonuses, a 95% reduction in power grid requirements for command bursts, a 50% reduction in micro warp drives signature radius penalty, so they can get around with micro warp drives and have a much smaller signature. They get a 5% per level reduction in micro jump field generator spool up. Now, the micro jump field generator was a new module introduced with these guys, and this allows them to jump 100 kilometers in a straight line from the direction their ship is facing and take all the ships with them that are within 6 kilometer radius of the ship. So if you're traveling in a small fleet, and maybe it's destroyers, maybe it's frigates, even up to cruisers, and you want to jump yourself and your cohort around, you can do it with this. and this introduced all kinds of new gameplay, including a style called spearfishing. You also get a 2% level in command burst strength and duration per level with this ship. Now, I realize that's a lot to cover in a short amount of time, and I thank you for sticking with these videos. Stay tuned for the next video covering 2016 and the additional videos after that. I will also very soon have videos coming out on the Drifters, the Triglavians, talking about Abyssal Dead Space and how to run it effectively, and other content, including the wrap-up of the Fitting for New Bros series. Thank you so much for following me, for supporting me on Twitch and on YouTube, for subscribing to this channel. If there's anything that you want to see, please feel free to comment in the comment section below. I do take all of your suggestions to heart, and I will introduce any content you suggest into my production stream. Thank you again. My name is Jurius Doctor. Have a great day.